Sorry about the postpone. Welcome everybody to our Wednesday morning, still as of now unnamed study class. So thrilled to have you. We're just discussing the issues with COVID and how we're getting through it. And Stuart, did you want to continue? Sorry about that.
That was where I started. Now, I just came back from a month in France. And it confirmed to me that I don't understand what the heck we are doing in the United States. If you go into a bakery in the morning to get breakfast, for example, 2 people are allowed in at a time. You go no place where masks aren't being not only required, but it's automatic. Nobody questions it. Nobody has to say anything. Everybody in every indoor venue was masked. Virtually all restaurant eating is outdoors. And even though you're going with masks, indoors, you're using masks. They just do it. And my view is, why the heck are we kowtowing to all of these people who don't want to get vaccinated? If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's fine. Don't impinge on my ability to do what I want. Virtually every public venue, museums and those kinds of things, require either proof of vaccination or a very recent test. So I have come back very, very unhappy with the U.S. response to, with the U.S. people's response.
That's right.
And taking of responsibility toward the epidemic.
New York City just had some laws that in order to go into any, I guess, even restaurants and public gatherings, or of course Broadway is opening, I think, even today, and I think they're going to be requiring, one Broadway show is opening, I think, today.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to be requiring it, but there are a couple of cities, but they are outliers, so far.
Yeah, but we have whole states that are threatening to take away school funding if they require masks.
It's very political.
This is absurd.
Oh, why don't we talk about this another time? Because I think we all probably agree. We can spend all time on this.
Right.
But what we're doing today to study is we decided to invite people to talk a little bit about places they went and the synagogues and Jewish communities they visited. If you have any pictures, I'll invite you. If not, I have a whole bunch of places I visited. And we are welcome to do this again later. So anybody want to talk about any of the places they visited before I start? Yes, Stuart.
Well, very recently, 3 weeks ago, we were in Provence, and Provence is very interesting. Provence had 4 cities during the Middle Ages, so to speak, that ended up as centers of Judaic thought and were important. 3 of those 4 cities have their synagogues surviving. One still is an active congregation, and Karen and I were very fortunate to get to go to all 4 sites.
Oh, nice.
What's really interesting, and I think makes these places worth seeing. I didn't know today's topic, or I would have had some pictures ready.
Well, you can get them ready if you while we're talking.
Yeah. The surviving synagogues, by and large, were redone in Napoleonic times when Napoleon really reopened things for the Jews, so that they are in very much the Louis XIV, Louis XV, etc. styles. And they're really beautiful places and interesting to see. And one of them, its claim to fame, and I've never seen it before, is that it's really very unusual. It's Sephardic, but it's a round synagogue. And
Oh, cool.
I don't remember seeing that. I've seen many with domes, but I've never seen one that doesn't have an eastern wall, because it doesn't have any square walls at all. Another big difference is that 2 of them, at least, maybe 3 of them, had balconies, But the balconies weren't essentially serving as a mechitza to separate the women. In fact, when they read Torah, they would take the Torah out of the ark, which was in a wall downstairs, walk it upstairs and read Torah from the balcony, where the officers and the rabbis and chazonim would be placed for that part of the service. So there were a couple of very unusual kinds of things. And I think unusual not only because they're Sephardic, but because they were special and unique to that area. France, turns out, has the third largest Jewish population, even today, in the world. And we're all aware of Rashi and whatnot. And there's these important Jewish centers in the north of France, near the German border. But clearly, the south of France was also Provence particularly, was also a major settling area. If anyone gets a chance, the Jewish sites there are really interesting and unique. And I suspect, I am sure, not very much seen by us. We would go there and they would have a docent. But the truth of the matter is, for the most part, the docent took Karen and me around, and that was it. They were easy to access. We didn't have the excess security things. Felt very secure as Jews all over France, including one of the places, B&Bs we rent, not B&Bs, Airbnbs we rented, turned out to be from a Jewish woman. And she expressed that by and large, she is very comfortable being a Jew, in this case in Paris.
To hear that.
Which is something you don't usually hear. Tons of Muslims around, of course, not surprisingly. But I saw no overt signs. It's not saying they don't exist. We saw in a month no overt signs of anti-Semitism.
That was great. And do you think it's because people aren't doing as many things because of the pandemic, or is just things getting better?
I don't know. I can only report what I saw in a month, not a month living there, in a sense, notwithstanding. That's still sort of a limited view, but I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear anything from the people in the synagogues, for example, either. I didn't see, you go to Italy or a lot of other countries, you've got to present passports, you've got to get past policemen and security and all kinds of stuff to get into these places. And I guess in Paris too, unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to go to services there. But in the synagogues we went to, that just didn't exist. They were there and that was it.
That's great to hear. I have, you hear about it all the time. I've been to France, I think twice, and you hear about it, but thank goodness, I've never been there for obviously that long. So to know that it's not going on is kind of cool.
For all my years, I have heard about how nasty the French are to Americans and all of those stories, and including a week in Paris, essentially living in Paris, because we were in an apartment and doing things locally. I just didn't see it. All I saw, and maybe it's a result of the lack of tourism, all I saw was a large group of wonderful hosts to a foreign visitor. I won't even attempt to explain why. I don't know why, but that was our experience.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. Does anybody else have any trips or photos they'd like to share?
Didn't know that it was going
Yeah,
to be.
I kind of must have gotten mixed up. I thought we were going to talk about the Pew Report. So
So
did
did I.
page.
Oh,
So did
I
I.
thought we were doing that next week, and I think we decided to do that next week, and this week do the trip thing.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I got mixed up.
So did he.
I could have also made the mistake, so I'll double check. So I apologize about that. So we can just do a little bit of this, and we can do the Pew Report next week, and then do photos and pictures another times, and I'll just show you what I have.
Sure, if you want, you show us what you have, yeah.
All right. So I hope everybody else is doing well. So I'm just going to show pictures from places I've been in the world with, let me get to this. And we'll do Pew next week. And I probably just got it mixed up. So I'm going to do just a couple different places and see if you guys have been there. The first, and not all these pictures came out because I didn't have one of the places I went to, and I've been to a lot of countries, but I just, don't take all the photos. But this is from Ireland. Has anybody been to Ireland? So Dublin has an old Jewish community that's still in existence. And there are a lot of Jews, and I didn't get all the pictures. I couldn't find them all for the places outside Dublin. But if you get west of there, there's a small town or two like Cork, where they had a significant Jewish population. I think Chaim Stern, maybe one of the presidents of Israel, came from Dublin. There's me, a good 40 pounds less of me, actually.
And younger.
And the weight is a lot less, and no kids, so there's no gray hair, if you notice. So if we go there, we'll see that they not only have in a lot of places you can't take photos of the synagogues, or I go on for services, but you can see they also have a museum there.
In Dublin, Rabbi,
Nearby.
Question about Dublin or some of the other places.
Sure.
What are there the same denominations that you find when you go to a synagogue in Dublin or in Ireland as we would in the United States? I mean, do they or have Orthodox, conservative? Maybe not. I don't know, but Reform and Orthodox.
Generally speaking, most of the time they're Orthodox, or there's usually a small number of Reform synagogues in most countries. I go to whichever one. I usually go for services. I'll go to the Reform one if there is one. If not, I'll go to the Orthodox one. As you can,
conservatism is pretty much U.S. based.
It is. I mean, there's small sections of it. In Israel, they have a bigger number, but in other places, they're a little bit smaller. Yeah, really. So, America is the center for the Reform and conservative movements.
Rabbi, you're too young to remember. Some of the rest of you might that in the, I guess it was late 50s, the mayor of Dublin was Jewish.
Yes, he was.
And
Sure.
Robbie Briscoe. And he
Yeah,
came to
right.
visit the
Yeah,
United States.
Yeah.
And I remember him there for a St. Patty's Day parade that he was there. Interestingly, at the parade, I heard a little Jewish woman in front of me talking to her friend, and her reaction was really interesting. She looked at her friend and said, "Isn't that wonderful? A Jewish mayor from Dublin, only in the United States."
And again, there has been some anti-Semitism there, but not very much. It's just a lot of Jews left at different periods to seek greener pastures, which is ironic because it's very.
Rabbi, could you tell us what we're looking at?
These are some pieces from the history of the Jews in Ireland at their museum. I
That's a
believe.
modern building.
Yeah. And so if you go there, you'll see, and the camera I had was terrible, so I'm going through a lot of these. But you can see, it's very similar to a lot of the stuff we would see in America or in Israel.
What brought the Jews to Ireland? Was it an expulsion from England, or was it?
I don't remember what brought them originally. I don't think they were allowed in Ireland after they were kicked out of England either. So I don't think they returned there till the 16th century, as they did to England. But we can check that. Ireland, obviously, it could be wrong because Ireland was a place where they kind of, the Dark Ages didn't hit it as hard as everywhere else. There were still bastions of literacy in that country, but I don't remember. I'll have to look up exactly where, when Jews returned there. That's a good question. But the synagogue is very nice. You know, I walked into the Reformed synagogue, and they welcome us. I was with a friend of mine who was a minister, and I ended up in some Spanish photos there. That's why I stopped, because I realized I'd gone to Spain. So, but the people were very nice. They're very proud. There's a small Jewish community, so I did go to services. I did go to Cork, where there used to be a mayor of that city, and a small Jewish community. It's like anything else. They went and looked for places to establish themselves. So some of the small towns ended up with Jews, that have mostly left. I noticed there was a park or two in small Jewish towns named after prominent Jews of those communities. But now I'm just going to go briefly. And again,
What were the services like? Were they a Saturday morning service, or?
I went to Saturday morning service. No, maybe I went to Friday night services, and it was fairly similar to what we have in America in the Reform movement. I believe they used the same prayer book. There's a little bit more Hebrew than what we're used to, and the accents were a little cooler, but pretty similar.
Rabbi and cantor?
It was a small synagogue, so I don't remember if the service leader was a cantor or a lay leader. It's been a while. But
Was the general population older or?
I think it's definitely older. I think there was about 3,000 Jews left when I went. I wonder what the population is now.
I just looked it up. It was it's about 2,550 now, up about 30% in the last year.
All right,
So
good.
it's very much a growing population there.
Yeah, so
Actually, I'm not sure what year that this thing was written, come to think about it.
well, yeah, I see the
But
same thing.
that's the range.
Yeah, and that's about what it was when I was there, maybe a little bit more. So it's a small population. I don't know if it's growing now. There was some economic hardship in Ireland when I was there. It had just happened. So the population, before it happened, so the population kind of went down when the country went almost bankrupt. And that was, how many years ago was that? 15 years ago?
Yeah.
And they probably lost a fifth of their Jews at that point. Some of them moved to Israel. I think a lot of them moved to Israel. And once once Europe came together, although it's not now, we understand, before Brexit, you could move anywhere, which gave them a lot more opportunities to get out as well.
Ireland, of course, has a lot of sympathy for the Palestinians.
Yeah, I think you find that in most places in Europe.
But especially because of their conflict with the Europeans and the domination by colonial powers. And they've drawn what they consider to be, similarities, but you didn't notice that. You're talking Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, right?
Right. Well, I did
Not
go up
Northern
north as
Ireland.
well. I went up all the way. We recently kind of drove all the way around and ended up in Belfast.
Uh-huh.
And so Belfast is a little bit different because it's such a divided, at least when I was there, such a divided city. Even though it's been officially integrated, Catholics and Protestants don't kind of do much together. That may have changed in the last 15 years or so. But let's go through, and I'm just going to show you some pictures of places. And I'm sorry, I obviously got confused on what everybody else knew. But let's go to.
Yeah. One other note, apparently, when the Jews were expelled from Britain, there were a good many who stayed in Ireland because part of Ireland was controlled by Britain, but a good part was controlled by the Gaelic government. And they, in a sense, granted some protection to, or at least did not expel the Jews because they were also against England. So there was not the expulsion from Ireland that there was from England.
And my Irish Jewish history, which I was very familiar with, has kind of left me a little bit. So it's good to know. So also I went to, so that's great. So I highly recommend Ireland. It was an easy place to live and to visit. Small, you can see a good portion of the country in a small amount of time. So what we're going to do now is we'll look at Toledo, which obviously is a very famous Jewish center. Obviously there we go. So as we know, Spain was a center, probably the center of the Jewish world for 400 years or so. And so if you go there, especially to Cordoba, Sevilla, or Granada, or Toledo, you will see that is where most of the Jews live. There today, most of them live in Madrid and some Barcelona and some on the coast. But in the heyday, if you wanted to see, you go to these places. Now, I wanted to go to Granada and Sevilla and what's in Cordoba. But however, the Jewish Museum had moved from, I think, Sevilla to Cordoba. I was only going to do 2 or 3. I was going to do Sevilla and Granada because Granada has the Alhambra. But the Jewish Museum, I think, had been moved from Granada to Cordoba. So I missed Granada. Is anybody going to Granada? I hear it's amazing. But here are some relics from, again, the Spanish. Jewish history is phenomenal. So there's history everywhere. What makes it so interesting, obviously, is it's also a Catholic and before that, a Muslim country. And so you see, and my pictures are terrible, as you can see, but you can see a lot of the Jewish centers of learning look like the Muslim or Christian and vice versa. So if you go around, you see a lot of the pieces. I'm trying to get some better pictures here. But you see the museum is very similar to what we would see in other places like Israel because there's so many historic pieces. And you'll see that some of the synagogues look like.
Is that the floor
That is the ceiling.
or the ceiling?
And you see how it looks just like it would in the Muslim. Of course, it's hard to tell. It looks very similar because it became a mosque or a church later. And so they kept they kept the walls the same. So you go to these places that eventually became churches. Some are now historic monuments. So you can see I had a terrible camera. My camera was stolen in Italy, I think. Yeah, it was stolen in Italy before I got to Spain. No, stolen in Spain, Italy. So this is the camera. I just had a terrible camera. Let's see if I can find some. And you can see also that they had some sort of mosaic type of flooring, although this one is not a picture, but it is a nice flooring. And you can tell here that it looks like a mosque if you go inside. I believe this is where Maimonides went to serve, where he prayed. So there we go again, like in terrible camera. And I think my camera broke. This was a trip where my camera broke all the time and I got stolen. I left one in a cab in Jerusalem. So I'm always finding these cameras wherever I go and they weren't always so good. But you can see how much, and even though it became something else, you can see up top that there's still Hebrew letters.
Oh, yeah.
When were you there?
I was in Spain in 2006.
2006, it says.
August 25th.
Yeah,
You were there on
2006.
August 25th.
All right. So you saw the statue of Maimonides in
Yes.
Cordoba.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll get to that in a second. This is a mixture of Cordoba, Sevilla, and Toledo. And you'll see, even those places, they have symbols that we recognize that are very recognizable for other things.
Yeah.
It's actively used, the synagogue?
It was not. It's just a museum.
Museum.
Let me see here. I'll go to the smaller ones. Let's see where I'm now. So now I'm
Spain
in.
has sort of an interesting history in terms of modern times. In 1992, 500 years later, they suddenly had the awakening that they made a big mistake expelling the Jews. And all of a sudden, synagogues all over were restored. And you go to Cordoba, and there's a whole section essentially devoted to Maimonides with its enormous statue in the street and whatnot. So there's been very much a complete turnaround from what was essentially Hebraophobic to Hebreo, the opposite of.
Well, I think there's a lot of things. It was the pressure from the outside world. It was the fact that Jews have skills, their economy. It was
Yeah.
so you can actually, although each you can if you can prove your ancestors came from Spain 500 years ago or 600 years ago, you can be a Spanish citizen. It's actually easier to become a Portuguese citizen because they only want you to prove that you have Sephardic ancestry. So if you can prove you are a Sephardic Jew, you can actually become a citizen of Portugal.
You know, where a lot of countries have gone more right wing. We just heard about a week or so ago, I think the president or the prime minister of Spain was in the United States, and he's a young fella. He looks almost like the Canadian prime minister, and he spoke eloquently. And I think they've undergone quite a renaissance, almost like you said, Stuart, in the last 10 or 15 years, in that they've moved more toward liberalism and more toward democracy, whereas a lot of the Eastern European countries, Hungary and so forth, have moved, much more right wing. And he spoke brilliantly about, fighting the epidemic, joining the European Union, democracy,
good to hear.
welcoming America back. And I thought he's a guy I would vote for just based on that one speech.
But I think it's so interesting when you go in there and the architecture is beautiful to see that these buildings were used at different times, probably as a synagogue, a church, and a mosque. And you can see, these buildings with the Hebrew on it. Now most of them, and they're just so beautiful. And so they're so beautiful that when they were taken over by somebody else, they didn't change the walls.
Than a mosque.
And
It
you
looks
see,
Moorish, some of it looks Moorish. You're like,
yeah, it is. It is Moorish. Remember, Jewish architects were going by what was going on at that time, and they were copying the Moors. Now the Jews, though, have moved back to Spain, are not moving to Cordoba, Granada, Sevilla, Toledo. They're moving to the big cities or the coast. So obviously, because that's where jobs are. Let's see what this was. And you can see they have, even years ago, there's the statue of Maimonides.
oh, wow.
And you can see this whole Jewish section, and they love tourists.
Yeah. Go back to the statue for a second, Rabbi. You look at his hand, they pointed out to us, his hand is all completely rubbed off because people are touching the hand.
Oh, really?
But maybe it's the foot.
It's the foot.
That's very bright.
foot?
Maybe it's the foot that they were touching, almost like they do with the Franklin Roosevelt statue. They claim that, they rub it off because of the,
Yeah. See.
Same thing at the bench with Forrest Gump that they had to move to the Welcome Center. People were chipping away at it. This is a better view. There we go. So we can look at that foot, the famous Maimonides foot. There it is. But the outside ones come out a lot better. Now these, I believe, are Sevilla, but again, very similar. They have the ghettos, which of course come later. Then we go to, I think this is Venice. Is this Venice? Let's see here.
Yeah, I think that's Venice.
I think it's Venice too. Because Venice, it is Venice. Perfect. Venice is very important because it is the place where the first ghetto was founded. So the first Jewish ghetto, you can see this street of Rabbi, named after me. It was so nice. This is the Great Synagogue. I also went to the synagogue, the ghetto in Rome, but I couldn't find those photos.
Rabbi,
Yes.
they in Venice, in the ghetto, they had 5 synagogues.
That's more than I was there, so they may have more sense.
And we were there how many years ago?
About 8, 9.
Yeah. And everyone was very nice. All they wanted us to do was come back and have dinner with them.
Yeah. And there's a lot of gift shops, obviously, but they have a beautiful little area in the ghetto, which is now a tourist destination. So you can get a lot of stuff there.
Ron, were you able to attend services there?
They asked us to, but we were there on a cruise, so we really didn't have enough time. We wanted us, there was so much to see in Venice.
Yeah,
Because
Venice.
when Karen and I were there, they did not allow us to come in to a Shabbos service.
A
The,
lot of places you have to call in advance and send your passport ahead of time. I believe.
Stuart, we were in one of the gift shops, and he's the fellow that told us about all the synagogues they had. That was either 4 or 5. And he invited us to come for dinner and then also to a synagogue.
This is kind of the courtyard. You can see it's not that big of an area. It's still, I think, a lot of non-Jews live there, but there are a few Jews who still live there. You can see, you'll see a lot of kosher restaurants because of all the visitors.
Has
They
this,
still have the
has this
chain
been
that-
has this been redone, kind of, resurrected? Because when I was there 40 years ago,
Yo, definitely.
we didn't see anything there.
Yeah.
We walked into this isolated place that was the ghetto, and maybe there was one thing on a wall, and there was nothing. It was very, it was very disappointing.
What happened is Venice has become almost purely a tourist destination. I think there's more tourists there than people actually live there. Kind of like a little bit like downtown Savannah. But this is, I went there 15 years ago. Ron, would you show us what you got there?
Yeah, this is what we got. Two of the things we bought at the gift shop there. They had really nice stuff.
When we were there was no one.
Yeah,
How long ago was that, Jane?
we did not have the restaurants. We were there about 9 years ago, Walling said.
Yeah.
That looks like a tribute. The wall looks like a tribute to a massacre at Venice.
It does. That's what I think it was. That's why you see it says Kaddish. It's I'm remembering terrible times. I would think it include.
No.
There
And
was
then
no
they
one
also-
around. We even had to find someone to let us in. This nice.
That's
old
weird because
man.
when I went in 2006, they were welcoming. I went into the gift shops. I went to the restaurants, and then I think they had a tour of one of the synagogues, which I have pictures of, I think, or maybe not.
This was
It's so different.
incredible.
And this is,
We saw the gate in front there. The chains were still there, which closed the city off at the time.
And there was something about Napoleon.
Napoleon was the one that,
came and freed them.
right.
and then of course, so
Can you
really,
back up about 3 or 4? That one, back up one more. It's a better picture of it. That's a comic book essentially that you can buy, but it's available for every Parsha. And when I was at Beth Yam, we bought that. I don't remember for who, but we bought it as a gift for someone.
oh, cool.
It's a really interesting kind of a
That's
gift
a great
item,
idea.
and you get it for your Parsha.
Nice. That's a good idea. We
Is
should do
it
that.
from Venice? Is that why they have it there, or is it?
I
is
think
it
the person who does, I think the artist who did them
Oops.
is there. The other item that I saw that I loved, but I didn't buy it,
I
but
didn't see that.
I loved it. There was a chess set. And on one side was all Rabbanim and Jewish characters, and the other side was church hierarchy. So it was a wonderful thing to say.
But again, this was out in the open, kosher restaurants.
Nothing there when we were there.
Yeah, no, this is more tourist.
It may have been different places because even here you can see up top it has the labeling of the old synagogue,
Yeah.
and they have a sketch of what it used to look like. And I guess you have to apply ahead of time to visit, which I did. A lot of places you have to send your passport ahead and register. Unfortunately, we all know the reason. This, I believe, is the synagogue. And obviously, things went bad in World War II. But I remember I had a good time there.
Your pictures are getting better, I think. You must
I think
have
outside, and I think I got a better camera
a better camera now, yeah.
because I had a camera that broke in like a third world country like Morocco, so I had to get one there for Spain, and then it was stolen in Rome, so I had to get another camera, which was a better one, and so I got better pictures. And then because in Rome I got my camera stolen, so I had to, and this is Morocco, I think, or is this?
When you travel, did you go to hotels or hostels or?
I usually stay at hostels. That I don't know if I'll do that anymore.
Were there any Jewish youth hostels or were they?
Oh, yeah. There's not Jewish youth hostels, but there's a lot of Jewish youth who do it, and a lot of Israelis. There's a lot of Israelis who travel, especially into third world countries, because it's so inexpensive comparatively. Because almost all the Israelis, they go to the military, and then they take a year off, and a lot of them go to third world countries and travel. This is the synagogue in Delhi where I went to high holidays in 2006, because I took a year off to travel around the world after my pulpit in Dallas. And I was going to go to Bombay, where the larger Jewish community works, because I was in Rosh Hashanah, then I went traveling, but I decided to come back to Delhi because I'd made some friends there and just do services there. Very nice. A lot of them obviously are diplomats because Delhi is the capital, but there were some Indian Jews as well. The famous place where Jews lived, of course, is at the southern part of India, which I did not go to. It's a giant country, so to have 3 or 4 weeks is just not enough to see the whole country. So I went north instead of south. But I did get to go to Delhi, and I went to Rosh Hashanah services and Yom Kippur services there. And sometimes you can't take photos at places because if you go on the Sabbath, you can't take photos. So you have to go at a different time to take pictures, which is what I did. It is not a tourist synagogue. You wouldn't know it was a synagogue from the outside, although there's not really that much anti-Semitism in India. There is crime. And so inside it's Sephardic. There were some Israelis. I believe it was an Israeli Chazan who was leading high holiday services, but not for the Sabbath service.
Where is that?
These are all from your same trip, Rabbi, that you did the whole year?
No, these are all different trips. I did one trip around the world. This is from Delhi. The next one I believe is from, the next one I think is from New Zealand. Yeah. I'm not the best I put everything in Shutterfly and make books, but I'm not the best at marking them. Now in New Zealand, I went, and obviously New Zealand is a first world country. So I went to the Reform Synagogue, which is a small little synagogue on the side. We weren't there. It was in, Wellington. We went to the one in Wellington. We did not have a chance to go to the one in, what's the capital of New Zealand? Auckland, yeah, because we were only there. We got there, we were only there a few hours left, and we were only there for one day coming back. So we didn't have time. But this is the one in Wellington. It's a small community, small Reformed Jewish community, very safe. They had no problems. You go inside, it looks like almost any small Jewish one in America, obviously, except everybody has cooler accents. We were not there for services. That is me, but that looks like Hong Kong. Let's go back to New Zealand. So New Zealand was just like, it's not a tourist synagogue. It was just like a regular Reform synagogue, a small synagogue, like where I grew up. And then, which was really nice because Jews, New Zealand have not, I keep pressing the wrong button, sorry, not been there that long comparatively. This next one.
Were they mostly business people who would move to New Zealand? Or
some business, some people just want a different way of life. It was just, it's a very tiny country. And, people were just having just probably wanted places to go that were a little different where they could find jobs. Now, I believe this one, which I'm going to show you, I think this is Hong Kong.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is a very
Wow.
stellar place. I think this is Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has a very financially affluent community. So they have a giant compound and then you have the Orthodox synagogue, and a kind of a JCC type place. And then you can go to the Reform Synagogue, which we couldn't do. It wasn't open. That's my wife.
Yeah. Oh, she didn't look Asian.
No. So Hong Kong has had a very, very big Jewish community, especially since it was taken over by the English. Always been there. And really nice people. We went there just for the day. And again, there's the synagogue. It's inside the compound. So again, as all places, it's, you have to go through the Israeli police. Now, this one is interesting. This is a rare one that most people don't go to. This is in Split, Croatia.
Wow.
My cousin had her bat mitzvah there. There's a tradition in their family that each one gets to go to a different country for the bar mitzvah. One went for bat mitzvah, they're all girls. One went to Paris. I went for that one. One went to South Africa, which we would have gone to, but it was the weekend before my wedding. So we obviously didn't go to that one. And so this is the small synagogue in Split, which is a beautiful area. And anybody can rent it. They don't have services regularly. There's my cousins and me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Why did she pick Croatia?
This cousin and her husband travel all around the world. They're really incredibly interesting people. He runs a business that takes him everywhere. I think he may have sold it. Have you ever gone or seen those places that mimic parachuting out of a plane where you feel like you're flying? Mm-hmm. That's him. He owns all those.
Oh.
So he bought the company. The company used it for like 1 or 2 test places. And then he opened it up for not only test places, but for entertainment. So it's not only used by military soldiers. You can also find it at Disney World around the world. So he's a race car driver now, but he was a professional parachute person, skydiver with the United States skydiving team. Brilliant guy. And so he takes his kids. They get to go. They're very worldly. And so I had never been to Croatia, but this was a very small, out of the way one. This is a small.
Can you move back? Can you move a couple of slides back? Because that slide, that looks like that top line there. That looks like Arabic.
It is, because they spoke Arabic. I mean, again, part of these areas were controlled. Remember, parts of Europe were controlled by Muslims.
Right.
Don't say it because I don't know.
And the spelling, Ben Yosef, but there's no Hebrew there. That's the
not
thing.
that one. Yeah, but there was other places. Yeah, no Hebrew. It's a small little place. You can see, if you look from the outside, you would just think. And again, they mostly survive through tourism. Because it's fairly near. This is not it. That's not it. That's not it. There you go. It's fairly near a very big tourist site in Croatia. It's about 2 hours away. Actually, that was it. That's it. So you can see they're selling. No, this looks like Morocco. I may have already gone to Morocco. Let me try.
I think Dubrovnik is in Croatia.
Dubrovnik. That's the place. I went there as well, and that is.
Yeah, we were there also.
Yeah, okay, so I apologize. This is, now I got confused, yeah. This is Morocco.
Oh,
so if you go to Morocco, there are various places that have, because the Moroccan Jewish community was very large, not just the Berber community, but if you were there, as you can see, again, just like Spain, it was very Muslim, Moorish, although I'm not sure Moroccans call themselves Moors. And so you see it's still this way. The Jewish community in Morocco through the ages was protected by the government, either the king, and to this day it still is. And so it's kind of a little unusual in that the Jewish community, although there's no Jewish community there anymore, was there for a very long time. There's a small Jewish community, but there's still a lot of tourism there for Jews. And if you haven't been to Morocco, it's a really interesting place. Everybody goes to Marrakesh, which is interesting. I would definitely go to Fez. And that is the caretaker of the Jewish cemetery and Jewish kind of like museum. And you can see there the cemetery. This is what it looks like. There are no rules for how a marker is supposed to look like for Jews. And this was how they looked like at this one.
So
With the little,
they're not
fake
marked. I
Knesset.
don't see any engravings in them.
some of them did. You just couldn't see them because they had worn off, but there were some that did.
They don't seem to have a geographic orientation.
No,
In
they
most
don't.
Cemeteries, most Jewish cemeteries, there is
Right.
this
That's right.
orientation that they're all facing the same way.
Yeah, and I think that is, this is a very hodgepodge
Oh, wow.
because you go a little farther over and you have more modern ones, as you can see in the back there, that look more like things are done in Israel today or were done later. So you can see people were at this, they kept the same cemetery, but then you see some that are more modern but have a similar style. And they would have still markers on, so this is the newer area.
Above ground.
Yeah, it's above ground, but I think they're still buried underneath ground. It's just they keep those above. This one was especially interesting because it also had some English along with various. This one had a photo on it, which is rare to see that, but you're in a different country, they do it a different way.
Oh, I thought that
This one had this really cool menorah to it.
It looks like those are caskets.
So this is one of the bigger ones but you can see this, it looks just the entrance or the hall next to it looks just like a Muslim. Look, so that's the little chapel in the middle honoring a major benefactor. I forgot who it was. Let's see if I have the thing there. It was somebody famous. No, that's not it. That's just the one I saw. I'll see if I have but they have private sections right there.
What city was this in Morocco?
This was outside of Fez, I believe.
Okay.
On the way from Fez to Meknes, I think.
Did you
I
go
really
to
gotta look at my notes for
Casablanca?
that.
Did you go to Casablanca?
I did go to Casablanca. That was
Is there
really
much
nice.
Jewish community there?
There is a larger one there than the other places. That's more of a modern city. So most of the Jews don't live in Marrakesh. Some live in Marrakesh or Fez or the traditional cities. They live in the more modern ones like Casablanca. Casablanca was cool because I went to Rick's Cafe and upstairs, upstairs, I found a VCR and I put in the movie Casablanca and just stayed there for 2 hours and watched the movie and drank alcohol. Like, what else? I mean, I was like, it's like, can I use this? They're like, sure, if you want. And I
You
did.
could have gambled.
I could have gambled. They did not have gambling there. And I'm a notoriously bad gambler. Now, this is a different one outside, farther out. The one we saw before, there's also a Jewish museum there, but it's more like take 500 years of history that you find all around and you just put it in a building. It looked like a junk store.
The mess, yeah.
It was a giant mess. They have things in different sections. Let's see if I have any pictures of those. This one was farther out, was not as well taken care of as that first one. I don't know if I have any of the pictures of the inside.
Wow.
Is there any symbolism behind these? Almost look like a barricade kind of things that you see nowadays, that they put in front of buildings. Did they describe why they're so unique?
There's always symbolism, and I forgot I had somebody who spoke a little bit of English. Remember, I'm not on a tour. I'm just backpacking through.
Yeah.
And on my own, and I find that there's a giant cemetery in the middle of nowhere. It's a Jewish cemetery, so I just go there. This one didn't have anyone to tell me, but the other one had a guy. Or is this the one that had the guy? This one is the one. That's the one where I found where they had the guy who talked to me. I forgot what he told me. They still have the small synagogue there, but it's not used. It's more of a tourist one still, because most of the Jews.
Were the stones in the Muslim cemeteries similar in design to those in the Jewish cemetery?
I did not go and check them out to see, from what I remember, or the one I didn't have the similar things. So I apologize. I didn't remember why. I thought I couldn't find, I guess, the pictures where they had the museum, which was like a junk, dealer, where they had one room with all the classroom stuff and they had hundreds of books and everything all over the place. The last one we'll talk about is one of my favorites, obviously. It's the Abu Daya, which is the Jewish community in Uganda. So I was backpacking through there.
What's the
This is a really interesting. First of all, let's look at the very bottom there. You see those shoes? Those are the best shoes I've ever owned in my entire life. They stopped making them 15 years ago. If you see any Carhoos of this variety, let me know. I will buy them at a very nice price from you, just to let you know. These shoes right there. So anyway, the Abu Dhabi.
What's special about those shoes?
I have really bad feet, and
Oh.
this particular brand of shoe was the only one that I ever felt comfortable walking in. So I went online and bought every single pair I could find.
They're not from Uganda. They weren't made in Uganda.
No, they're not. They're European.
Oh, okay.
It's actually the company where I think they're the ones who Nike bought their logo from it. Like I think they started with that logo and Nike bought it in the 70s.
Oh.
To
But
quote
this-
from a Broadway show, where's Uganda?
Uganda is right next to Kenya.
Oh, the Lion King.
Yes. So I went to the Abu Dhabi, become a very famous Jewish community. They are,
documentary?
they're based upon basically a leader who had his whole community converted in the 1920s. So then after Idi Amin killed a high percentage of them after he was ousted, a lot of them returned. It's very interesting because they've created a very big community where they have a community center, schools, they're educating people. The Christian and Muslim kids in that area go to the Jewish school, and you can stay at the guest house. They have become very connected with the kind of the conservative movement has taken them on. And if you go there, it's an incredible, if you're ever there, because a lot of people go to Kenya, obviously, but it's really easy. If you go there, it's an incredible place. And you can meet the leaders. That was the caretaker. You can meet the kids. And they're all Jewish. Boys above 13 are wearing yarmulkes.
Have many Ugandans gone to Israel? I know we hear about the Ethiopians.
That is the big issue. I'll go through this. You can see this is where one of them, they took me to this rock painting thing from prehistoric. This I don't need to be in here. I'll skip all this. Hopefully there's nothing embarrassing. There is stuff embarrassing. Okay, never mind. There you go. Now back at the school, and you can see that they're all studying, wearing yarmulkes. They have turkeys. They all have the nets for all the kids because who live there at the school, because obviously malaria is a problem. That is, I believe, the director of the school. There's every generation's trying to get more educated. His age, there were 3 educated people: the rabbi, the head of the school, and an architect who was the wealthiest. And the next generation had kids going to college, and the next generation they're out of school. So they're really increasing the educational level. And a lot of the donations come from America and Europe for all the books and everything. But you see, they study in Hebrew and the Ugandan language as well.
Rabbi, are they poor? Are they very poor?
They're very poor. Yeah, comparatively speaking. There's 3 areas where they live. This is by far the biggest one. They had just recently got, I think, water and electricity in one building. But they're way far beyond financially anybody else because of the donations that have coming. So they learn English. And now when it comes to Israel, that is a real dilemma, because unlike the Ethiopians, they do not trace their lineage 2,000 years. They're from converted groups of people in the 1920s. They also have a very big hospital that is there for everybody. This is the old hospital. That's one of their going to college students. That's their sanctuary. Now, they also became fairly famous because they made an album of Jewish music with the nusach they use. So if you start listening to it, you think you're listening to African, just general African music. And then you go back and you listen again, you realize, oh, wait, that's Ein Kelohenu. You know, so if you've ever had a chance, you can go online, I'm sure. There's the outside of the synagogue.
I'd like to hear that.
These are books donated by, there's the Beit Midrash is a study center. He's going to college, to university. You can see the conservative movement has been really helpful in helping their community.
Did the children learn the Bible in Hebrew?
They learn Hebrew, their native language, and they learn a little English. But it's kind of strange to go when you see all these kids wearing yarmulkes. And you can see there, that is their, and there's, I mean, it's a pretty, I think there's like 3,000, I think, Abu Daya, I think.
What attracted them to Judaism? You say in the 1920s that there was a...
Well, what happened was this leader was supporting the Christians there, and he did not get what he wanted. He was expected to be overlord over a giant area. The English did not give him that, so he said, I'm going to start my own religion. I mean, instead, he went to Judaism.
Really?
So converted that. So it's just converted all the people he was in charge, you know, and they've stayed Jewish pretty much since.
Wow.
Now this,
Do they have their own rabbi? Who serves as rabbis?
they have their own rabbi who went to the conservative movement's yeshiva, I believe in New York. I've met him, super nice guy. He spends a lot of time, obviously, abroad raising funds.
Mhm.
Now, in South Africa, we know, of course, it's a big Jewish community. There are indigenous Africans who are Jewish in South Africa living in small tribes. I met some of them through my time in Africa. But obviously, South Africa has a big, or used to have a big, it's actually getting a lot smaller, Jewish community. They have Reform synagogues. They have Orthodox synagogues are actually, you know, much bigger. I went to both of them. This is a statue of me that they made while I was visiting. I was so happy that they did it.
I thought it was Frodo.
It is not Frodo. Frodo came to visit.
Oh. Who was the statue of?
I don't remember now.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't
Let's
supposed
see
to
if
be
I can
Moses.
read it.
It wasn't Moses or anything, or
It could have been Moses, actually. That would probably be a very good guess.
yeah.
Cape
Or
Town,
Abraham, maybe. This is Abraham. I can't move the picture up and down. Oh, there you go.
And, yeah.
You may read it better than me. It says Herman Wald.
Oh.
So obviously, probably
Unless
very
it was
famous.
Unless he was the sculptor, Herman Wald.
It could have been.
Yeah.
They have their own Holocaust. They have a little compound in Cape Town with an Orthodox synagogue, a museum, and a welcome center. Really nice people. You can see it's beautiful. I really like this picture. And
Wow.
yeah, isn't that beautiful?
Isn't that beautiful?
Rabbi, I think most of the Jews in South Africa are very wealthy.
They were, but a lot of them have moved.
Well, they didn't, because I have met a lot of people, relatives and other
Oh, yeah.
people, they were quite wealthy.
It was a very affluent community, still is, but a very high percentages moved to Israel, America, or Australia.
And when
Yeah.
when they moved away, they were not allowed to take their assets out of South Africa.
Right, depending on when you
So
left.
they've come into economically much more difficult circumstances than they lived there.
Depending when they left as well. But you can see this is a beautiful Sephardic synagogue that they use. Now, when I went to synagogue, I went a couple times because I was in South Africa for a bit. It does not let me do this. It doesn't let me go to the movement unless I'm in the right one. Come on.
Were you there after or before the apartheid? And
This is way after. This is
wait. I forget when that was.
that was in the 90s. But I was there in right the year before I came here. I mean, I was literally there a few months before I came here.
2012, okay, yeah.
That may be the last ones I have. Let's see. That's why I can't go further. Now, when I was in, and that's just a few of them, as we know, when I was in South Africa in Cape Town, I went to the Reform Synagogue for services. I ended up in Johannesburg for one night. And it was really, I was supposed to be there for like an hour. I took a bus from Swaziland to Joburg to the bus station, which was also the airport, and also the train station. I was going to take the train. They have a very famous train to Cape Town, but it was booked for a week because of a holiday. So I ended up staying in Johannesburg for a couple of nights. Is the only time I felt unsafe in Africa. And I don't know if I told you the story where I got to the train station, bus station. And obviously I couldn't get a train out. So I was going to walk out to get a taxi. It was at night. And all of a sudden, all these guys, like 7 or 8 people, kind of attacked me.
Oh.
And then grabbed me and brought me inside. And they said, no, you cannot go outside at night in Johannesburg alone. So they were actually saving me. They said if I went outside, there was a very high chance I would be mugged and hurt. So they said, you need to call the place you're staying, have them send a taxi to where you are, have that person come inside, and then you can go into the taxi with that person. Don't just take a taxi. You have to have them send you the taxi.
Were they black or white, the people that?
They were all black. Yeah, they were
All
very,
black.
very. And so obviously Johannesburg was still a little dangerous, but I didn't feel dangerous any time really. But when I went to the synagogue, so I stayed in Johannesburg for a couple of nights, and I went to the synagogue, and of course I walk in, these people are saying, how are you doing? Oh, what are you doing? So they invite me over for dinner, and they talk about what it was like living in apartheid, and it was really interesting. So I had a wonderful night with this family, as they were actually hosting a musician, and so he actually played for us that night as well. So it was really great. So I'm sorry again about the mistake. Next week we'll go to the Pew study then.
That was so interesting. Thank you.
My
Very
pleasure. And if you guys, we can do it with you guys, bring your stuff another time, anytime you want.
Very
very
nice
nice.
meeting tonight,
Very good.
today.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry I don't have all the specifics, but it's a lot easier if I'm just doing one, then I kind of review everything. But you guys stay safe. We'll do-
Rabbi, next week for the Pew study, maybe what you want to do is have Jennifer put in that we will be talking about that, because maybe we'll get a wider audience.
That's a good idea. I'll do some good
Subject is
idea.
like almost, what is the state of religion in the United States vis-a-vis, Judaism? And there was one other section that's not in the article that he referenced, which he says there's a specific section, which I didn't get a chance to read, about the Chabad. And I was interested in what they had to say about the Chabad in the Pew study. I didn't read that one. I'll try and get to it and see it.
Okay. Well, that's great. we will not have class next week because there's still a chance I'll go to Disney
Okay.
World.
Okay.
We will see. And then we'll do the Pew study on the 18th.
Okay.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Because I may not know till Monday, because I think I can cancel my reservations with the 24 hours. We'll wait and see what it's like down there.
Rabbi,
Yes, Jeff.
try to get on YouTube, like your class from last week. I noticed that the classes are only on YouTube up until March of 2021. That's the last thing the temple seems to have listed or recorded.
Really? Let me check. Maybe our site has gotten too big. Give me a second.
See if
I'm
you
going to go
can
ahead and
get-
I'm going to stop YouTube now and stop live. So everybody will see you in 2 weeks.